At 49 years old, with less than $200 to her name, two jobs that were slowly breaking her body, and a household that ran entirely on her back, Dorothy made a decision. She didn't tell a single person, didn't ask for advice, didn't post about it. For 8 months, she followed one silent rule that changed everything. And what she did is so simple, most people don't believe it when they hear it. Have you ever gotten up in the morning and just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, feeling like the day hadn't even started, and you were already exhausted? Have you ever worked so hard for so long that you stopped being able to remember what you even wanted for yourself? Have you ever smiled through a whole dinner, laughed at the right moments, cleaned up the dishes, put everyone to bed, and then sat down in the quiet and felt completely, utterly invisible? Dorothy knew that feeling like she knew her own hands. She had been living inside it for years. This is the story of a woman who learned, the hard way and the only way, that the most powerful thing she ever did for herself was something no one around her ever saw coming. Dorothy was 49 years old and worked as a home health aide in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. She had been doing this work for 16 years. She drove to her clients' homes early in the morning, helped them bathe and dress and eat breakfast, reminded them to take their medications, listened to their stories when they needed to talk, and held their hands sometimes when there was nothing else she could do. It was hard work. It was also, in a quiet way that she rarely admitted out loud, the work she was most proud of. But the job paid $11.50 an hour, and the rent had gone up twice in 3 years. So Dorothy also worked evenings at a grocery store 3 nights a week, stocking shelves from 8 until midnight. She would drive home after midnight, pull off her shoes at the door so she wouldn't wake anyone, eat whatever was left from dinner standing over the kitchen sink, and be back up by 5:30 the next morning. Her household included her daughter Tamara, who was 23 and working part-time while finishing her degree online, and Dorothy's mother, Miss Ruth, who was 78 and had diabetes and could not be left alone. There had been a husband once. That was a long time ago and a different chapter, one Dorothy did not read out loud to anyone anymore. Her dream, if you asked her on a good day in the right kind of mood, was modest enough to break your heart. She wanted to save enough money to take one weekend trip, just one, to Savannah, Georgia, where she had never been but had seen pictures of those oak trees draped in Spanish moss, and thought that if she could just sit under one of those trees for a couple of hours, she might remember who she was before she became everybody's everything. That was the whole dream. One weekend, one trip, trees. She had been putting it off for 11 years. There was always something more urgent, always someone who needed what she had before she could keep it for herself. The first devastating blow came on a Thursday in October, the kind of gray Atlanta day that can't decide if it wants to rain or not. Dorothy came home from her afternoon shift to find her mother at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her and an expression Dorothy had never seen on her face before. Miss Ruth was a woman who had survived things Dorothy couldn't fully imagine. She didn't scare easily, but that afternoon her hands were shaking. Dorothy set her bag down. "Mama, what is that?" Miss Ruth slid the papers across the table. It was a letter from a collections agency. The amount owed was listed at the top in bold print, $4,200. A medical bill from a hospital visit 8 months prior that Dorothy had thought was covered, that she had been told was covered, that she had called about 3 times and been reassured about on every call. It was not covered. Dorothy sat down at the table and read the letter twice. Then she set it face down on the table and stared at the wall. "I didn't want to tell you," Miss Ruth said. Her voice was low and careful, the way you speak when you're already bracing for the weight of what you're about to put on someone. "I kept thinking it would work itself out." Dorothy did not say anything for a long time. There was nothing to say that wouldn't have come out wrong. She picked up the letter again, folded it, put it in her purse, and started making dinner. That night, after everyone was asleep, Dorothy sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and a pen and did the math. She wrote down every bill, Every income source, every number she could think of, she added, she subtracted. She added again in case she had made an error. She had not made an error. There was no way to pay the collection bill and also keep up with rent and also keep the lights on and also make sure her mother had her medication refilled at the end of the month. There was no combination of numbers that worked. She sat there for a long time with her pen in her hand. Then she did something she had not done in years. She went to the closet in her bedroom, reached to the very back of the top shelf, and pulled down a shoebox. Inside the shoebox was a birthday card her daughter had given her 3 years ago, a photo from a church retreat she'd attended in 2018, and $80 in cash. It was money she had been hiding from herself, tucking away $5 or $10 at a time whenever she had it, with no plan, just some instinct that said keep something back. She counted the $80, then she put it back in the box. She didn't touch it that night, but she sat with the box in her lap for a long time. The weeks that followed were the worst of the year. Dorothy kept working, kept driving, kept stocking shelves at midnight, kept helping her clients get dressed in the morning, and remembered to smile when she needed to smile. But something inside her had shifted, and she could feel it. She stopped sleeping well, stopped eating lunch because she wasn't hungry, and it was also one less thing to spend money on. She started waking up at 3 in the morning with her heart pounding, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in her head that never came out right. One Sunday in November, she almost quit. Not her job, everything. She had come home from church and gone straight to her bedroom and closed the door, which she almost never did in the middle of the day. She sat on the edge of the bed. She thought about the $4,200. She thought about the trip to Savannah she had been putting off for 11 years. She thought about how her hands ached when it was cold and how she was only 49, but sometimes felt like a woman twice that age in a body that had been asked to carry too much for too long. She pulled her suitcase out from under the bed. She didn't know what she was planning to do with it. There was nowhere to go. She had no money, no plan, no destination. But she sat there with that suitcase beside her and felt, for the first time in a long time, the full weight of how tired she was. She sat on that floor for a long time. She didn't pack the suitcase, but she didn't put it back under the bed either. She left it out, open and empty, like a question she wasn't ready to answer yet. 3 days after the suitcase Sunday, Dorothy had a client named Mrs. Alberta Price. Mrs. Alberta was 82 years old, had lived in the same house in Decatur for 51 years, and had the kind of calm about her that Dorothy had always found hard to explain. Not the calm of someone who had been untouched by hard things. The opposite. The calm of someone who had been through enough that almost nothing could shake her anymore. Dorothy came in that Tuesday morning to find Mrs. Alberta already up, sitting in her armchair by the window with a cup of tea, watching the birds at the feeder in the yard. Dorothy said good morning, started on the breakfast, and tried to keep her face in its usual position. She was not very successful. Mrs. Alberta watched her move around the kitchen for a few minutes. Then she said, without looking away from the window, "You're not here today." Dorothy looked up from the eggs. "Ma'am? Your body's here. You're not." Dorothy put down the spatula. She almost said, "I'm fine." She had said "I'm fine" so many times in her life that the words had worn smooth, like a stone in a riverbed. But something about the way Mrs. Alberta said it, without accusation, without pity, just as a simple observation, the way you might say it looks like rain, made the usual answer feel too small for the moment. "I'm having a hard time," Dorothy said. "Financially." Mrs. Alberta nodded once slowly. Dorothy didn't know why she kept talking. "I feel like I can't get ahead of anything. Like every time I get close to being okay, something pulls the floor out." Silence. Mrs. Alberta took a slow sip of her tea. She set the cup down on the little table beside her chair. She looked at Dorothy for a moment with those steady eyes. "How much of what you earn is yours?" she asked. Dorothy blinked. "What do you mean?" "When you get paid. How much of it do you actually keep?" Dorothy thought about it honestly. None of it, really. By the time bills are paid, it's gone. Mrs. Alberta nodded again, like this was exactly the answer she expected. She looked back out the window at the birds. Then she said, quietly and without any dramatics at all, "A woman who keeps nothing back for herself has nothing left to stand on when the ground shifts." She didn't explain it. She didn't expand on it or turn it into a lesson. She just let it sit there in the air between them, the way you'd set down something breakable and trust the other person not to knock it over. Dorothy finished making breakfast. They ate together, mostly in silence. Before Dorothy left that afternoon, she stopped in the doorway. "Mrs. Alberta, how do you start keeping something back, I mean, when there's barely enough to go around as it is?" The old woman looked at her for a moment. Then she said so simply it almost seemed like it couldn't be the answer. "Start before you think you can, small enough that it doesn't hurt, and tell nobody." Dorothy drove home with those words turning over and over in her head. Start before you think you can, small enough that it doesn't hurt, tell nobody. December arrived and Dorothy started. She opened a savings account at a credit union across town, one that wasn't connected to the bank her regular checks went into. She told no one. She set up an automatic transfer for the first of every month. $25, that was it, $25. It felt almost embarrassingly small, but it was the first thing in years that belonged entirely to her. The first lesson arrived without a name, the way the real ones always do. Dorothy had been putting $25 away for 6 weeks when a water pipe burst in the bathroom, and the repair cost $180 that she did not have. Tamara offered to put it on her credit card. Miss Ruth offered the $40 she had saved from her fixed income. A neighbor offered a loan. In the past, Dorothy would have taken all of it and felt crushing guilt for weeks. This time, she took a breath, called the repair company, and negotiated a payment plan. 2 installments over 60 days. It wasn't comfortable, but she handled it without going to the people around her and without touching the $25. When it was done, she sat down and realized she had solved a problem on her own without asking anyone to carry it with her. And she understood something she hadn't been able to name before, that she had trained the people around her to expect her to manage everything, not because they were selfish, but because she had never left them space to step up. She had been solving before they even knew there was a problem. She had made herself the only option. The second lesson hit her at work, in someone else's house. One of her clients, a woman named Mrs. Josephine, had a daughter who visited every other Sunday. The daughter was polite and clearly cared about her mother, but something about her visits always left the room feeling tight. One afternoon, Dorothy overheard the daughter say, gently but firmly, "Mama, you know you can't afford that. That's not realistic." Mrs. Josephine had been talking about planting a small garden in the backyard. Dorothy went quiet in the hallway. She thought about every time someone had said a version of that to her. Every time a dream had been measured against a bank account and found too expensive to mention. And she thought, when did we start asking permission from other people's common sense before we're allowed to want something? That night she wrote Savannah on a piece of paper and put it in the shoebox with the $80 and the birthday card. It was the first time she had written it down anywhere. The third lesson came in February, on a night shift at the grocery store. Dorothy was stocking the breakfast aisle when her manager, a man named Greg who was good at his job but not particularly good at people, came over and told her that they were cutting her weekly hours from 12 to 8 because of scheduling changes. He said it like it was a small thing, like it was simply a matter of logistics. Dorothy nodded and said okay. She finished her shift. She drove home. She sat in the car in the parking lot of her apartment complex for 22 minutes before going inside. She had to decide something, and the two options felt equally painful. She could say nothing, absorb the cut, and find another way to make it work. Or she could go back in and have a conversation she didn't know how to have, with a man who didn't seem to think it was a big deal, and risk making things awkward in a job she needed. She sat in that car and felt the full weight of the choice. Then she went back in the next morning, before her shift started, and asked to speak with Greg privately. She told him clearly, without drama, that 8 hours a week was not workable for her, and asked if there was any flexibility. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he could probably get her back to 10. It wasn't 12. But it was more than 8. And in the car afterward, Dorothy realized something important. She had spent so many years swallowing small losses because speaking up felt dangerous, that she had let those small losses pile up into something enormous. She had confused surviving quietly with being strong. They were not the same thing. The fourth lesson was the gentlest one. It was a Saturday in March, late morning. Dorothy had a rare free morning, which she usually filled with errands. But she had done the errands the day before, just to have this particular morning free, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that was still hot, and no one had asked her for anything yet. She just sat there. Tamara walked through, surprised to see her mother sitting still in the middle of the day. "You okay, Mama?" "I'm fine," Dorothy said. And then she paused, because for once it was actually true, and she wanted to notice that. "I'm just sitting." Tamara got her own coffee and sat down across from her. They sat together for a while without talking, and Dorothy noticed that the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like something, like a kind of fullness she had forgotten was available to her. She understood then that rest is not what happens when everything is finished. Everything is never finished. Rest is something you have to choose in the middle of the unfinished on purpose. The fifth lesson came in April, sideways and sharp. Dorothy had been saving for 4 months. The account had grown to just over $300, the most money she had held in her own name in years. And the thought came, uninvited, maybe she should tell Tamara. Maybe she should mention it to her mother, just so someone knew, just so it felt real. She picked up her phone. She started to type a message to Tamara. Then she stopped. She thought about every plan she had ever shared before it was finished. Every dream she had mentioned too early. How the people around her hadn't meant to, but they had poked holes in those plans with their worry and their practicality and their love, and the plans had gone flat before they had a chance to hold air. She put the phone down. She understood then that some things need to be protected not from bad intentions, but from the simple weight of other people's fear. Keeping her savings quiet wasn't secrecy. It was shelter. The sixth lesson arrived in May, through someone she barely knew. A woman from her church, Sister Gloria, stopped her in the parking lot after service and said she had heard Dorothy had been going through a hard time. Someone had mentioned the medical bill. Dorothy felt a flush of something hot move through her. "I'm okay," Dorothy said carefully, managing. Sister Gloria reached out and took her hand. Not to say anything, not to offer advice, just held it for a moment and looked at her steadily. "You know," Sister Gloria said finally, "the most dangerous thing a strong woman can do is make it look too easy." Dorothy thought about that all the way home. She had spent her whole adult life making hard things look manageable because she had decided somewhere along the way that this was what a good mother looked like. A good daughter, a good worker, someone who did not require anything extra, and in doing so, she had made herself into a kind of myth, the woman who always handles it, which meant no one ever thought to ask if she was okay, because she always looked okay. She had built a wall so smooth that even the people who loved her couldn't find a door. The seventh lesson came in June from her own hands. Dorothy had started taking walks in the evenings, just 30 minutes, through the neighborhood after dinner. She had started this in April, partly for the exercise, and partly because she needed something in her day that was hers alone, something that didn't produce anything or serve anyone. On a Tuesday in June, she was walking past a small community garden that some of the neighbors had put together along the fence of a vacant lot. She had passed it dozens of times without stopping. That evening she stopped. The garden was not fancy. Raised beds made from old wood, tomato plants tied with strips of old t-shirts, beans coming up along a wire trellis. Someone had planted marigolds along the edges just for color. Dorothy stood there, looking at those marigolds for a long time. she thought. Something grew here because someone tended it, not in a grand way, in a small, patient, daily way, watering when it needed water, leaving it alone when it needed that. She walked home and transferred an extra $15 into her savings account. Not because she had extra, just because she wanted to, just because she could. The 8th lesson was the last one, and it was the quietest. It came on a Sunday in July, 8 months after Dorothy had made her silent decision. She was at church, and the choir was singing something she had known since she was 7 years old, and she was not crying. She was just sitting there with her hands folded in her lap and the music moving through her, and she thought about the morning she had pulled that suitcase out from under the bed. She thought about how she had sat on the floor with it, empty and open. And she thought, I am not that woman anymore. Not because anything had been solved, exactly. The medical bill was still being paid down. The money in her account was not enough to change her life, not yet. The trip to Savannah had not happened. But she was different inside. She had kept a promise to herself for 8 months. Every month, quietly, with no audience, no applause, no one noticing. And that act, small as it was, had told her something about who she actually was. She had learned that self-respect doesn't come from the result. It comes from deciding to keep going before you know what the result is going to be. August came and Dorothy's savings account reached $800. Not a fortune, but more than she had held in her own name in over a decade. She booked a single night in Savannah, a small inn she found online with good reviews, and a price that was possible if she didn't eat out more than one meal. She chose a weekend in October, after the worst of the summer heat had passed, and the trees would be turning. She didn't tell anyone until the week before she left. When she told Tamara, her daughter got quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mama, you're going by yourself?" "Yes." "Is everything okay?" Dorothy smiled. "Everything is more okay than it's been in a long time." Tamara looked at her mother for a long time. There was something in Dorothy's face that she could not quite read, something settled and sure that she wasn't used to seeing there. "Okay," Tamara said finally. "Okay, good." Miss Ruth said even less. When Dorothy told her mother she was taking a weekend trip, Miss Ruth just looked at her and said, "It's about time." Dorothy almost laughed. The weekend in Savannah was not dramatic. She walked. She sat under those oak trees with their long curtains of Spanish moss and felt the October air on her face. She ate shrimp and grits at a diner near the waterfront by herself, at a small table by the window, and she felt no need to explain to anyone why she was alone or to perform enjoyment for an audience. She was just there, present, hers. She called no one while she was there. She took a few photos. She sat by the water in the late afternoon and watched the light change on the river. On the drive back to Atlanta, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long. She had almost forgotten. It was a feeling that existed. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that felt like being whole. Her co-workers noticed something when she came back. Not anything they could put into words easily. One of the other home health aides said, "Dorothy, something's different about you." Dorothy said she had taken a little trip. The woman nodded like that explained everything. "You needed that," she said. "I could tell." Mrs. Alberta noticed too. When Dorothy came in that Tuesday after Savannah, Mrs. Alberta looked up from her armchair and studied her face for a moment. Then she nodded once, satisfied, and looked back out at the birds. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. It was at the grocery store on a Thursday night in November that Dorothy met Sharon. Sharon was a woman around 45, stout with kind eyes and the posture of someone who had been carrying things for a long time. She was stocking the cereal aisle on Dorothy's nights, and they had worked alongside each other for months without ever getting past hello. That night, Dorothy noticed Sharon standing still in the middle of the aisle, staring at a box of cereal on the shelf in front of her, not reading the label, just staring, the way people stare at something when they're not seeing it at all. Dorothy stopped her cart. You doing okay?" Sharon looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, sorry, just tired." That kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Sharon looked at her for a second. Then she let out a long breath. "Yeah, that kind." They kept working side by side for a while in silence. Then Sharon said quietly, without looking over, "I feel like I can't save anything. Like every time I get a little ahead, something comes up and it's gone. I don't know how people do it." Dorothy thought about October. She thought about $25. She thought about a savings account that nobody knew existed for 8 months. She thought about an old woman in an armchair telling her to start before she thought she could. "Can I tell you something?" Dorothy said. Sharon nodded. "You don't start by saving a lot. You start by saving something that feels small enough that nobody notices, including you." She paused. "And you don't tell anyone, not at first. You keep it for yourself until it's strong enough to stand up to other people's doubt, because it will meet doubt. It always does." Sharon was quiet for a moment. "How long did it take you?" 8 months before I felt it, but it started the first month. First week, honestly." Sharon nodded slowly. "And it worked." Dorothy thought about those oak trees, about the light on the Savannah River, about sitting at a table by herself eating shrimp and grits and not needing anything from anyone. "It worked," she said. They finished the aisle and moved on to the next one, and the conversation moved on too, to other things, lighter things. But before they clocked out that night, Sharon found Dorothy in the break room and said, just quickly, before she could think too much about it, "Thank you. For real." Dorothy nodded. "Start small," she said. "Tell nobody, give it time." Sharon put on her coat and went to the door. She paused there for a second. "What do you save toward?" she asked. Dorothy smiled. "Something that's just yours. You'll know it when you think of it." Sharon left. Dorothy tied her scarf, picked up her bag, and walked out into the cold November parking lot. The sky was clear and very dark and full of stars. She stood there for a moment, looking up. She thought about Mrs. Alberta. She thought about $25. She thought about the empty suitcase on the bedroom floor and the woman who had sat beside it not knowing what came next. And she thought, "I passed it on. That's how it keeps going." And you? Have you been there? Have you been the woman in that kitchen who keeps everything running for everyone and then sits down at the end of the night and realizes there's nothing left that's just hers? Have you been putting something off, some small dream or some quiet goal, because there's always something more urgent, always someone who needs what you have before you can keep any of it? Is there a version of Savannah in you somewhere? A thing you've been saying someday about for longer than you want to admit? Then I want to ask you to do one thing. Write in the comments right now, day A1, and tell me one thing you're going to do today just for yourself. It doesn't have to be big. It can be putting $5 somewhere no one else knows about. It can be writing down the name of the place you've been wanting to go. It can be sitting down with a hot cup of coffee and not getting up until it's finished. I want to read every single one. If Dorothy's story stayed with you, if something in it felt familiar in a way you're still thinking about, then this channel was made for you. Every week, there's a new story here. Women who found their way through the hard parts, lessons that don't come from books. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss a single one. And if there's a woman in your life who needs to hear that it's not too late to keep something for herself, share this with her. Sometimes the right story finds someone at exactly the right moment because someone else cared enough to pass it along. Thank you for being here, for listening all the way through. Dorothy didn't give up on herself, and you don't have to either.